Welcome, everybody, to the Rytown Park Commission meeting of August 15th, 2017. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please, Debbie.
Commissioner Sack?
Here.
Acting Commissioner Ferrara?
Here.
Commissioner Rosenberg?
Here.
Commissioner Salanitro?
Here.
President Zuckerman?
Here. The minutes of July 18th, 2017, I hope everybody had a chance to read them. If so, if there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion and a second?
So move, sir.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Yes.
None opposed. Our first item of business is the audit report for 2016. We have a PowerPoint presentation. Jeff? O'Connor Davies, Jeff Shaver, and Chris Kopf.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Pleased to present the results of the audit for the Rytown Park Commission for the year ended December 31st, 2016. My name is Jeff Shaver. I'm a partner with PKF O'Connor Davies. Currently manning the projector is my partner, Chris Kopf. Before I get started out, and before I forget, I'd like to thank the entire staff of the commission, Debbie, and the accountants especially, for all the hard work they did. I wouldn't be standing before you today without all their hard work and dedication. So I'd like to thank them. The agenda on the first page. I'll start off with the audit results, the summary of the auditor's opinion. I'll go through the general fund, a budget to actual summary, do some details on the revenues for the general fund, some details budget to actual expenditures, and I'll follow it up with a fund balance analysis. The audit results: we've completed the 2016 financial statements of the Rytown Park Commission in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. We have issued an unmodified opinion relating to the commission as of December 31st, 2016, in the year that ended. An unmodified opinion is also referred to as a clean opinion. It's the most favorable opinion that you can receive. This is a summary, general fund summary of the budget to actual. I'll start off by saying the results were very positive for the year. The first two columns show the original and final budget. The third column are your actual results for the year, and followed by a variance column showing the difference between the budget and the actual. You'll see the budget for revenues was $939,000. Actual revenues collected were $1,141,000. That's a $202,000 positive budgetary variance. Expenditures were $964,000, and that was $62,000 greater than the original budget. Taking the revenues of $1,141,000, subtracting your expenditures of $965,000, you have excess of revenues over expenditures of $176,000. That was your net surplus for the year. Applying that to the opening fund balance, $163,000, brings you to end of year fund balance or end of year cumulative surplus of $339,860, which has certainly been trending, or at least over the past 2 years, in a positive direction. And each of those 2 years required no operating subsidies from either the town or the city. That doesn't count capital. That only counts general fund operating.
Well, that's a good thing. Right, Mayor Sack?
I'm sorry?
I said the fact that we don't have to, the town and city don't have to contribute.
Yes,
for
surplus is a good
deficit
thing, and I think we're
is
going to
good.
figure out ways to spend that surplus tonight.
That's on the agenda.
And the next slide is just some revenue details. You'll see the total revenues on the bottom. $939,000 agreed to the previous slide. Actual revenues collected, $1,141,000. I won't take you through all the numbers, but you'll see some larger variances. Parking was $391,000, which is $108,000 greater than the budget. And the Midgate guests were $351,000, which is about $88,000 greater than the budget. There was higher than anticipated attendance. There was a fee increase for non-residents only, which resulted in the higher revenues for the year. The next page is just in narrative form what I just said. The total budgetary variance is $202,000. That's 17.7% of your revenues, which is a very healthy surplus number. I'll move on to your expenditures. You see, the budget for expenditures was $902,000. Actual expenditures were $964,000. The personal services or salary section of the budget, the largest component of the budget, $448,000. Actual expenditures were $514,000. Some of the costs in excess of the budget were a result of the greater than anticipated attendance, which caused a need for more staff on hand. The other variances are small. I'm not going to talk about them in detail. The bottom surplus number or deficiency number on the expenditures is $25,805. Next slide, Chris. And that's just exactly what I just said, so I can gloss over that slide. The last slide is the fund balance of the general fund, what this all comes down to. In 2015, total fund balance was just under $164,000, and the increase of $176,000 increases your fund balance. And your fund balance at the end of 2016 is just under $340,000. And it's in terms of governmental reporting, it all falls into what's called unassigned fund balance, which is available for spending at the discretion of the commission. And that number, $340,000, is approximately 20% of your operating budget, which is a healthy surplus. So definitely positive results for the year. And that's really the highlights. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions of the auditors?
Just one question. What is the recommended percentage that we should be maintaining as fund balance versus budget for what we do as a commission?
That's an interesting question. For most municipalities, 10% is a common number that gets thrown out there. But I don't think the commission is a normal standard municipality like the town of Rye or the village of Port Chester or the village of Rybrook or the city of Rye. So the budget's smaller, so a percentage greater than that could be much more reasonable. It depends on what the infrastructure needs are and the ability for funding. So I would think, in my opinion, 10% would be a low number for the commission.
Yeah.
So I would like to see, to give you a number, I would probably be in favor of a 10 to 20% fund balance number. Would Chris, would you agree with that?
Yeah, again, it depends on the aging infrastructure and your ability to handle an emergency if it came up. I mean, a couple years ago, you had a storm that hit and creates a lot of damage. So when you have a small budget, the percentage has to be higher so you can handle that. You know, the timing on the damages until you can bond or repair the damage. So I would think 20% is a reasonable range for you to shoot for every year.
Yeah, we also don't have the ability that standard municipality has to go to the tax base. Our income is totally derived from the fees that we get in the park. There is no tax levy, so any deficit, as we all know, has to be made up by the city and town of Rye.
Well, I asked the question out of good practice. So if we run a balanced budget and there's zero at the end of the day, increase or net differential, is it a good practice to have money added to the budget to maintain that 10 to 20%? In other words, if we were at zero, what would you say? Zero is no good? We should have
I would
20%?
say zero gives you no cushion in the case of unforeseen emergencies, revenue shortfalls, bad weather patterns. You want to keep the park going, and if you don't have some fund balance to absorb any of those impacts, I would think zero would be too low. It'd be like telling someone who's maintaining their own personal checking account to keep no money in a savings account. It's just not something that you'd find any auditor or any accountant recommending.
Thank you.
Well, if I may, I mean, you talk about unseen emergencies. We have seen emergencies. So we're not saving money for something that might happen. We have things that need to be invested in right now. And so what has been the fund balance over the past 5 to 10 years? I think it's been
Negative.
zero.
Yeah.
There's been
So-
years where it's
Why
been
I'm asking
zero.
the question, we got.
So now that we have some money, I think that we ought to actually use it for things that need to be fixed. But
That's what I was getting at.
because I agree that the Rye-Town Park Commission is unlike any other regular municipality. And I think for that reason, you suggest that the fund balance should be a higher percentage of the budget. I think that it actually can be a lower percentage. And in fact, we have had a much lower percentage for the history of the commission. And I think that's actually been a problem. I guess I'm curious as to why you think when we have so many needs, and if you stick around after you're done, you'll hear about them, why we should maintain such a high percentage of fund balance.
I think because it's a small budget and it doesn't give you any wiggle room. But of course, with all that said, everything I said before being true, it's up to the commission to determine what ultimately what the fund balance should be, whether they should use the surplus for capital expenditures or to return to the city and the town, or whatever the use of the fund balance is ultimately at the discretion of the commission.
Thank you.
I agree with Joe on this. We've been fortunate. I like to think that it's partly due to the commission's practices, but we do have a fund balance and we have many needs. And I think that we're going to start to use that fund balance to address some of the capital needs that we have, especially those needs that are on an emergency basis. There's no question about it. It doesn't do the commission any good to maintain a fund balance that is never used. As long as we recognize that the backup is the willingness of the city and the town to fund any possible deficits in the future, we need to go forward and use that fund balance judiciously, not wasting it, but using it judiciously to perform the capital work that is certainly necessary. So with that, if there's nothing else, I say thank you. And I'd like to move to the resolution, which probably should have been up right after this, but resolution item 4.4, a resolution to accept the auditor's report, which basically states that it acknowledges that the required audit has been completed and submitted by O'Connor Davies.
Why do we need that?
Pardon? It's a requirement.
Yeah, we have to adopt it.
Well,
Okay.
it's always been
Yeah.
done.
Frank, do you do it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure we do it, but okay.
In the village and at the
All right.
IDA, we do it, yeah.
Okay.
May I have a motion and a second?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second?
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Sack?
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Ferrera?
Yes.
Oh, don't push the microphone. Thank you. Where was I? Acting Commissioner Ferrera?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Salanitro?
Yes.
President Zuckerman?
Yes. Next item, item 4.2, discussion with the Greenwich Point Conservancy. The president of the Conservancy advised me today that he is out of the state attending to illness in the family, and so we will place that upon the next agenda. And now, the highlight of the evening, capital projects report. Lisa Easton, our architect. The floor is yours.
I'm not sure if that's going to work. Can you hear me?
Not
Not really?
Yes,
How
I
about
can
now?
hear you.
Can you hear me now? Better?
better.
Good evening. I'm sure that you have all received copies of the existing conditions assessment reports that we prepared. My firm is Easton Architects, and we've been working with the park since 2002, when we got the property listed on the State and National Register of Historic Places. And then after that, we proceeded with the roof replacement of the main administration building, also known as the Tower Building, about 8 to 9 years ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. 10 years. And so we were called out in April, late March, early April, by the commission due to some falling stucco and debris coming off both the main administration building and the bathhouse building. And the bathhouse building is the 1925 building. That's a one-story plus attic piece that's used as the main bathhouse for the park and beach. And the main administration building, as you all know, is used partly for administration functions for the beach when it's open for the summer months only. So the buildings have never been meant to be occupied year-round, so they don't have the infrastructure or the maintenance for year-round facility. There's not really a steward there 12 months out of the year. So deterioration on the buildings is ongoing. It has been ongoing since the inception of the park in 1909. So it's not unheard of and not a surprise to see that the buildings need repair. It is unfortunate, however, that parts of the building are now falling off. So we'll start with the bathhouse because that is probably the more critical of the two. And I say that only because it's used more often than the main administration building, and we do depend on it for the main bathroom facility for the park and for the beach. So that building is, as I mentioned, it's a one-story plus attic building. It's comprised of a solid masonry wall, which is built of brick, and it has a two-layer system of stucco that's applied directly to the brick. The roof structure is wood. It's a wood with projecting rafter tail eaves with a terracotta clay tile on top. So the roof assembly is really quite simple. It's wood rafters with wood sheathing with a layer of felt and then the application of the clay tiles. So it's a very simple waterproofing assembly. It's essentially the same thing that is on the other buildings in the park, the main administration building and the two pavilion shelters in front of the main administration building. The roof there has been suffering for many, many years, long before I ever moved to Rye. A tree had fallen through there. Limbs had fallen during Hurricane Sandy, adding more damage to it. So there are many, many, many penetrations through that roof that have not been maintained or repaired. In addition to that, just the overall age and deterioration has added to multiple points of water infiltration. So we have leaking in the building itself, but more importantly, we have leaking into the wall assembly below. And what happens in that solid masonry bearing wall construction is once water gets in, it's trying to get out, it's trying to evaporate out. The exterior of both the bathhouse and the main administration building have been painted. And they've been painted many, many times with products such as TheraSeal, which prevent evaporation of moisture. So the water is trapped in the wall and it can't get out. So eventually what happens is it pushes the face of the stucco off, and that's why we see this delamination occurring on all sides of the bathhouse. Predominant signs of deterioration or mechanisms of deterioration we witnessed were delaminating stucco, detached stucco, large-scale cracking, hairline cracking, biological growth, and mechanical damage. And so all of these things combined, if you saw the report, we color-coded graphically the level of deterioration and tried to quantify levels of repair. So our recommendations when we came to the fore were 3. One was immediate life safety stabilization because the timing of our visit was such that the park needed to open for Memorial Day weekend. So we created a short-term immediate stabilization plan, a short-term restoration or repair strategy, and a long-term repair restoration strategy. So those are the 3 levels. We've implemented the stabilization. We took care of that by May 15th, where all of the loose pieces of stucco were removed. And I should preface that with our methodology. We had a boom lift on site for approximately 1 week, and myself and one person from my staff physically sounded the entire building from top to bottom. We also physically sounded all sides of the main administration building. And so when we found a void, so it's a sounding mechanism, when there was a void, If we couldn't remove the stucco by force, we left it in place. We removed everything that was about to fall from the building, is essentially what I'm getting at. And then there were large-scale areas that needed to be repaired, because now we were exposing the brick, and we didn't want the masonry to get soaked and create more leaks behind. So L&M Construction, who were the contractors who did the successful roof repair replacement on the main administration building, they provided us with the lift, the operator, and then two laborers who came back with the stucco, since we actually knew the stucco mixed from our previous work. We knew the historic stucco. They could replicate that, and they did spot patches. Now, they didn't paint it, so there's a bunch of patchwork on the building, but at least it's sound, it's safe, and it's historically accurate, believe it or not, without any paint on it. So we did that on both the bathhouse and the main administration building to make the two buildings safe for the summer occupancy. Moving forward, though, both buildings are still experiencing leaks through the roof. We did patch repairs. L&M has been out twice since to do more patch repairs. But once water gets into the building, it's really, really hard to figure out where it's all stemming from. We know it's coming through the roofs, and we know it's coming through the walls in the bathhouse. So our recommendation is to obviously phase the approach to repair of the building. So when we did the reports, we did them independently for each building, so you could have a cost assessment for each, you could have a scope of work for each, and then you could see where we prioritize the recommendations, starting with life safety hazards, then going to code deficiencies, then we move into the restorative plan. So to back that out, what we're coming to you tonight to recommend you do at this point is take care of the bathhouse first, and the immediate point of departure would be addressing the leaking roof. And the long-term stabilization plan for that is to replace the roof. Now, when we did the main administration building, the tower building, we salvaged all of the original tile when we took that roof down. It's no longer manufactured, it's a different shape. So with the grant money that we actually had new tile fabricated for that component. So on site, we have about 7 pallets worth of roof tile. In addition, with the bathhouse that we probably have about 50% that's salvageable. So we can actually save a cost on our cost estimate. We can save the cost of purchasing the clay tile by reusing what we already have on site. So what that means is the roof project would consist of removing all of the underlayment, removing the tile, cataloging and storing it, removing all of the underlayment, the felt, the flashing, and there are 20 stucco pediments that wrap the perimeter of that building, and those are seriously deteriorated. And that is, the steel lintels are rusting, they need to be reconstructed. So part of the roof project would include the reconstruction of the 20 pedimented pieces. So it's new roofing. We're going to put in approximately 10% of the roof structure will need to be replaced. So that's new roof rafters, new purlins, new underlayment, which would be tongue and groove to match the original, 2 layers of roofing felt, and then reattaching the clay tiles. We would be putting new copper flashing in all locations, and rebuilding the chimney, which is the source of the main leak, to the office below, and replacing the flat roof that projects over the entries to the bathroom. So that would be project number 1. And so if we look at the cost estimate, our overall cost estimate for the whole building is somewhere in the vicinity of $2.3 million.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just a
Yeah.
very quick question.
Sure.
Is that for everything from recommendation 1 through 5, soup to nuts, or is this just piecemeal?
No,
One-
which, the
The
2.3 billion?
2.3
Yeah.
is everything, soup
That's
to nuts on the
everything.
bathhouse.
That would be everything?
Soup to nuts,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
So one of the,
All 5 of your, including future work phases?
that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. Mhm. It would include the complete full repair of the bathhouse, inside and out. That's another component. It's not just the exterior. It would be actually providing handicap accessibility upgrades to the bathrooms, and actually capturing underutilized space in the building, so you could potentially move the offices that are in the main administration building into the bathhouse and gain a larger volume of space in the main administration building to use for another purpose. That is sort of the goal. So it was upgrading both the inside and the out in the cost estimate. So phase 1 would be stop the leaks, so you can use the building properly.
Yeah, and that estimate, the commission has a letter from you
Yes.
dated yesterday, setting forth this roof stabilization plan at a cost of approximately $350,000.
Correct.
Do you want to continue?
No, go ahead.
The cost was backed out because of the emergency nature of this kind of particular work that has to be done as a first step. Assemblyman Otis and I and Ms. Easton had a discussion, and the Assemblyman is confident that he can secure funds in the amount of approximately $250,000 towards this repair. And, but it would require a contribution of the commission of approximately $100,000 to secure that money. I've had discussion with the City of Rye, as Mayor Sack is aware. We've discussed this in terms of capital needs. And what I'd like to do tonight is, pursuant to an email I sent out yesterday, to request that the commission agree to authorize us to contribute that $100,000 if we can secure that grant. And I think this is what Mayor Sack was alluding to when he said, well, we have some plans that we can use that surplus for.
Right, so I think, you know, you talk about undesignated fund balance. I think we can designate a portion of the fund balance, this $100,000, to this possible likely purpose. You know, I think we still probably have to then approve the appropriation of that money.
That is correct.
You know, when we have a more specific project in front
Right.
of us. And just generally, and Lisa, thank you for your presentation. I mean, you know, when the auditors were here, we talked about, you know, what's the appropriate percentage of budget to set aside for fund balance? You know, is it 10%? Is it more? Is it less? I think here it's a different discussion. Here we have a discussion where we have just one project coming in at $2.3 million, which is more than 2 times the size of our annual budget. So, you know, to put that in perspective, I mean, the City of Rye's annual budget is roughly $30 million, its operating budget. Can you imagine if we were to spend, you know, $60 million a year on just, this is not even all of our capital needs, this is just one of them. So I still think we have a big problem on our hands here, but I think, you know, tonight all we're really doing is, you know, whistling past the graveyard a little bit, but you know, setting aside a little bit of our fund balance so that we can start to address this one immediate need. But I think we have to do some serious thinking about how we're going to address the other needs.
Yeah, I mean, that's, part of that will be hopefully next year going out for additional CFA applications to get additional funds and determine the next step in the plan for the park. But this is a first step, and I don't think we need, I spoke to Assemblyman Otis, he does not need a formal resolution, but I'd like at least a motion and a second to commit the initial $100,000 towards this grant. And obviously, we would have to formally appropriate it by resolution before we spent any money.
Where would Assemblyman Otis be getting the funds from? Do we know?
I don't know. He said that there are funds that would be available.
Okay.
And, you know, I think that it's terrific on his part that it can. This is outside of the CFA
That's right. There's
process.
appropriation monies.
You may know
There,
more
I don't
about
know
it,
exactly
Lisa.
which pot he's getting it from, but there are separate appropriations funds available for preservation work in the state of New York that are supplemental to the consolidated funding application, which is what Gary's referring to, the CFA application, which is what we have available to us under the Cuomo administration for all capital preservation work, rehabilitation work, infrastructure work. We're all kind of vying for the same pot of money to get work for preservation. So fortunately, Assemblyman Otis can get us some money from another area as we pursue the grant application itself for larger projects.
We're on a local as well as a national
Yes.
Register of Historic Places.
That's correct. And we did that
Are there
because
federal funds
that's
as well?
why we did that. That's exactly
Because I'm,
why.
you know,
When
perhaps
we
we're
did the
missing
roof-
something here.
When we did the roof project 10 years ago, what we did was actually, we got a grant from the federal government first, and it was matched by a state grant, so it was unusual. And then contributions from the commission brought forth the full project. But yes, that was the main generating force behind getting it listed. There's no downside to it. It just opens you up to money, even from private institutions, that will only fund if it's listed on the National
Right,
Register.
so, you know, it's funny, Lisa, you probably have the furthest memory of any of us up here, except for maybe Benny.
Benny,
because
yeah.
10 years
Welcome
ago,
back, Lisa.
Thanks, Benny. Good to see you.
you know, truth be told, I mean, and this predates me and all of us, except for maybe Benny and certainly Lisa. You know, when we took that money to fix the roof, and by the way, that's all that was done, was the roof was fixed. The building underneath has still never been fixed. You know, there is a point of view, or there was, maybe there still is a point of view out there, that maybe we shouldn't have done that at all. Maybe we should have just said, you know, the building is, you know, its time is over. But now, you know, that decision, it's water under the bridge, because
Yep.
now, you
Yeah.
know, it's landmarked, and it's, you know, we can't touch it.
But it's
I-
it's part of everyone's collective memory. It's part of our history. It's important to
No, I know. I'm not
maintain.
saying, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that there was a different point of view out there. I think now, despite the, you know, in addition to the fact that it's water under the bridge, we're talking about a bathroom, and I think we need a bathroom, you know, so we have to, you know, unless we just tear down the bathroom and start over again with a more functional building without trying to fix
I don't
the
think we
special
can.
roof, but.
And the bathhouse itself is actually, it couldn't be more simple. It's
Yeah.
quite functional as a bathroom because it is really one of the only parts of the park that's handicap accessible, and it provides enough of the bathroom facilities to service the park. If you were to tear it down and build it now, you'd have to comply with current code, and you would magnify the size of the building that's required. So I think keeping it, the bones of the building are in decent shape. The problem is that maintenance of the buildings in the park as an entity have been kicked. They've kicked the can down the road for generations. So here we are faced with the problem where they're getting worse. The longer they're left to decay, the worse the problem will be to solve. So starting in this implemental cycle, by putting the roof on the main administration building, we save the whole infrastructure. We save the envelope of that building to recreate it and give it a new life. It could be a very interesting income-generating facility if it were reused by another use. So bringing a private partner to this could be very interesting and breathe new life not only to the buildings but to the park without compromising the historic integrity that the park represents.
Right. Well, that's always been the theory.
It's always been my position.
It's always been the dream.
Well, we're taking the steps now.
Yes.
I don't want to look back and over generations of commissions and commissioners to say they should have done this, they could have done that. We're here today, and we really have no choice, and I've said it at previous meetings, that unless we do this, we will not have those buildings. And I do not personally, as a commissioner here, want to go into next summer using porta potties for our park goers. And that's what the real danger is if we don't get this roof fixed. So we need to do this, and hopefully we can do it as rapidly as possible. Any further comments?
Yeah, I just have one. As we restore, how much flexibility do we have to use non-1909 building materials? I mean, do we
Well, we
need to
don't.
use
I mean, we don't.
terracotta tiles? Can we
Terracotta
use?
tiles, yes, but for the main administration building, for example, the company Ludovici's been around for 125 years. They're still making tiles
Yes.
in the same fashion they did. So they're easy to acquire. The stucco, for example, we've replicated the historic mix, and the reason why we do that is because you want the building to breathe. If you put a contemporary stucco mix on that masonry assembly, you would be trapping moisture. You would have a whole different evaporation rate that the building envelope could not sustain. So when we replicate with modern material. When we replicate mortar, we replicate with modern material. It's just making sure that the masonry that's been there for 80 some odd years or 100 years can coalesce with whatever you're putting on its face.
I understand.
So
Thank
it
you.
doesn't really generate a cost to the project to do it in that fashion.
Well, one of the things, though, Frank, is also to recognize that it is a skilled craft. When we worked on it last 10 years
10
ago, getting the mold and the finials had to get done. You know, we were fortunate to have L&M Roofing, who did a lot of restoration work on these older type buildings. but walking on the roof, placing the tiles, and I think good hindsight back then to get those extra tiles, here we are today with
Yeah.
7 loads of, 7 pallets of tiles. We anticipated this. I'm
We did.
actually surprised it took this long
Yeah.
to talk about it, but here we are.
The
So
other-
there is a it's not just a roof, it's a pretty
It's
delicate
particular.
roof.
But one thing to note, I thought about this after Hurricane Sandy hit, there was no damage to that roof on the
Right.
main administration, not one tile moved.
Yeah. We also did a lot of cleaning in the building, too. I
Yes.
won't get into the details of it, but there was a lot of necessary cleaning
Yes.
on that upper floor. We had some structural work we had to do. I know we had some change orders on some timbers and other things. Necessary evils, but, $2.3 million for a building that's, what, 80 years old? Something like that?
Well, 1925 is the
25.
bathhouse, 1909 is the
So
main.
it's
Yeah.
over
It
100.
deserves a little love.
Well, you do the math and do the
Yeah.
amortization of that money. It's, we got good value. So if
We
we get
did.
another 125 years out of 2.3 million, we'll be
Did pretty
okay.
good. Yeah.
The one last thing I would just say is, with regard to this grant that Steve Otis is going to get us.
Gonna hold them to it too.
Well, I mean, I know, Gary, you've
Now it's
spoken to him.
public.
He hasn't spoken to me. I don't really know what the grant involves or what the strings are that may be attached. I'm always worried about strings that are attached. Frank, I think you are too. So I would just say, we've already accepted funds in the past before any of us got here. So I think to the extent that we're ensnared by strings, we're already ensnared. I also think that it's the town of Rye that accepts the grant, right, and not the city of Rye. So if there are any strings, that's for you to deal with, Gary.
Well, I don't
No, I think the
know
Right
that
Town Park
that's
Commission
true.
got
I
it.
think it's the commission.
It's the commission.
But
got it.
we could see when it comes through. We'll see what the paperwork says. Like they say, it's, job's never over till the paperwork is done.
That's right.
So we'll see. But this is an opportunity for us to get going.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you have more? Do you want to go forward with any of the other plans? That's up to you. You're at the podium.
I don't
It's
know.
yours.
Do you want me to? I mean, you've all digested the reports, I assume. So, Joe, 2.3 is only for the bathhouse.
Right,
We didn't
exactly.
talk about the main administration building
I
yet.
know.
But
Full
maybe
plus
we
for
should
the
save
other.
that for a more of a planning discussion, where
We'll
we
get to
lay
the
out the
capital
parts
budget.
and talk about the financing
Yeah.
moving
All
forward.
right.
Did you get a copy of the capstone by
I
any
did,
chance?
yes.
Because
Mhm.
you find some,
Yes.
it's all melding together to where we are
Yes.
talking about
Yep,
the number
Debbie
one
provided me with that.
problem.
Thank you.
We're trying to move forward on all fronts. And I personally want to thank you, Lisa.
You're very welcome.
Nobody is more knowledgeable about this park, about the structures, and what has to be done, what can't be done, what should be done than you are.
Thank you.
And I think we are really fortunate to have you on this team. And thank you very much.
Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Commissioners.
I don't know, Gary, usually we take comment from the public on items like this. I don't know if there's anyone.
Well, if
that wants to
anybody
speak.
wants, I don't see anybody, yes, as we go along, if anybody wants to speak, please feel free to come up. All right. Thank you. The next item is the landscape maintenance contract. Debbie, do you want to go over this a little bit?
Sure. So we, for the last several years, 3+, the cutting of the grass and general landscape maintenance has been outsourced and handled by a company called Greenway Property Services. That contract ended about a year ago. I put together an RFP and went out for asking for proposals, and I split it out by Rye Town Park versus Town of Rye to give contractors the ability to bid on the portion of the job that they wanted to do. Greenway Property Services bid on both, but that also gave us the ability to understand what they felt the job was worth. So as it turns out, Greenway Property Services is the lowest responsible bidder. We also have the cost at which they felt the job could be done. And so that is what we're voting on today.
How many bidders were there?
There were 5 in all. for the landscape portion of the,
Right.
of the
This does
project.
not include snow removal.
It does not. No, the RFP had landscaping services, tree cutting, stump removal, and snow removal. We're only going forward on the landscaping portion of it at the moment. We're moving forward on the other parts now.
So not only were they the lowest responsible bidder, but they're actually the company that's been doing it for the past few years already?
Yes.
And have we been happy with their service?
Yes, I would say that it needs to be an actively managed relationship, but I think it's a very productive one.
And they clearly know what they need, right?
They know the
They
job.
have the inside track.
They do.
Yeah,
May I have a motion in a second?
so move, sir.
Come on up.
Hi, Russ Gold, Hayward Place in Rye, City of Rye. To the extent of this, of the contract that we're going to engage in here, is it just, cutting the lawn and trimming the trees and stump removals, or is there, do we have any plans for active restoration of certain parts of the lawn areas in the park that you see happening in other parks? They'll rope it off and they'll actually, turn it over and they'll reseed it and, things. Because last year, if I recall, at the end of the year, we were supposed to reseed what we use as overflow parking adjacent to the pond. And I got to tell you, they came in, and I know this for a fact, they came in November, punched a couple of holes, did this, this kind of aerating thing and scattered some seed. That is not a restoration project if we're trying to restore areas of the lawn. So I just want to know if that's part of the contract. Are we looking to restore areas of the lawn or just cut the grass?
I have two things to say. We're just cutting the lawn on this and trimming the beds. That's it.
Okay.
I was unaware of a restoration project of the lawn where we have overflow parking
Well,
with
again,
aerating and
they
overseeding.
come in every year and they aerate.
Yeah, Olmsted has been doing that every year, but
Olmsted does that, not
Correct.
not the landscaper.
right, and the area that they've identified is not the overflow parking area. However, if the commission would like me to do so, I'm more than happy to explore it with them.
I mean, it just
The
seems
timing is perfect.
It just seems
Yeah.
like we never really put any effort into regenerating the grass areas. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you help me with your name and address, please?
Nancy Vincent, I'm a resident of the city of Rye. In regard to grassy area restoration, I'd like to bring to your attention the area that was disturbed. It's at the top of the path, gravel path, just before you enter, I guess, Playland Park proper.
Where the sewer project came through.
Exactly, the sewer project. And that whole rise of land opposite the lovely, floral plantings and other plantings that the Friends of Rye Town Park, maintains. Opposite that, where there were, two benches which were, moved successfully and then, put back into place, really nothing was done to restore the grass. I think, I'm a regular, user of the park. I walk there several times a week and pass by that. And it, at best, grassy was, thrown to the wind. But the ground has not been restored, really. And it makes that area that was once very attractive and loved by, people into just a sort of a hard surface.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I am aware that the contractor hired for the job did a pretty weak job of replanting the grass seed. Yes, but I will I will happily go back and chase them to see if we can hold them to a higher standard.
Well, that was a county contract, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I was
correct.
just going
We
to
ought to
raise
have the
that
county
too.
of Westchester go after them, too.
Yeah, I was
We
going to
shouldn't
call
have to
the
do
Hugh
that
Grecian,
ourselves.
the engineer in charge of the project.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that should
Which
not be
I've
our.
done, but if it's not
That should not be
done,
our
it's-
responsibility, that should be the county's responsibility.
Yeah.
They ripped it up, let them put it back together again. So, any other comments on this issue? If not, a motion and a second, did we have one? I know we started to.
Can I just ask, I'm just curious now that you mentioned Olmsted, how many different groundskeeping services do we have? And why is it split up?
Well, I don't know the history. I expect that, yeah, I have no idea why Olmsted was engaged by Bishop Nawatnik to do this task.
But that's all they
Of-
do? That's all Olmsted does?
That's all they do for us.
Okay.
Olmsted does other things.
Other than Olmsted doing the grass repair such that it is, and other than
What about the tree?
Greenway doing,
What about
The
lawn
tree,
cutting.
tree cutting?
We have tree cutting.
yeah, well, we have a firm called Bartlett, which did an extensive with the, this was a project started by the Friends of Rydtown Park. They did an extensive and exemplary tree inventory and maintain a relationship with Bartlett. And we do have Bartlett that comes in and they take care of our trees and they trim. Actually, I think Bill Lawyer could speak to more details about that.
What's our total spend on Olmsted, Bartlett, Greenway, and anyone else for the year, every year, on these types of items?
Well, let's
I
take a
can't
look at
really-
the,
You'd have, the part that I'm involved with is the trees, and that's, because of the help of the Friends and our work with Bartlett, we've been able to keep that below budget every year and still get the things accomplished. What Bartlett does is, it starts off in, Charlie, if you're from the Friends of Rydtown Park, we go out with the team from Bartlett and do an inspection of this is around April, of trees that have been damaged, trees that have broken limbs, and he makes up a proposal. That's phase one, and that gets done usually by the end of June. We just finished up phase two, which is in addition to all the pruning and removal of branches and even cutting down dead trees if you have to. The next is the treatment. Some of you may be aware that there's this thing called the emerald ash borer beetles, which is a highly destructive invasive insect that has been killing off ash trees, in huge quantities. It's now gotten into Westchester. So what Bartlett has done is they've come up with a plan. They have chemicals that sort of inoculate the trees to keep them from getting this, to make them able to withstand it. So just like with human health, you want to have basic health, and then you get your flu shot to protect against that sort of a thing, and that's kind of what they're doing with the
Right.
trees.
So I guess all of these different companies have different things that they look at. They don't necessarily have to be done by the same person, but I think at the end of the day, after all, it is a park, right? And we just heard from Lisa about the facilities that need to be maintained, but it's a park. So, I think, and it's a manicure type of park. It's not, a nature preserve where it just goes to nature.
Just one other thing, in addition to all this that we've discussed, the Friends hire their own contractor who comes in and does most of all the beautiful flower beds that we have, particularly the ones right there not too far from the bathhouse, where we have the sundial garden and the flag garden, and these are just beautifully maintained, as
Yes.
are all the others around the perimeter, including what we call the stairs to nowhere garden, which is, right? So, it's good to have people come in and speak up for the parks, because I think there are an awful lot of people, and myself included, who are at that park every day, and it's just because of these really good people from the, what's the name of the? Creamer, I think is the, yeah. And so I don't necessarily need I'm not sure why we would need two different lawn companies. I mean, it seems to me the same people who mow the grass could also do the treatment. But, I think it would be well worthwhile to specify exactly what they're doing. And maybe that does, I think, Debbie, you're the one who deals with Olmsted.
yeah.
Yeah, so spell it out maybe in more detail, and then see whether or not maybe one of these other companies who do lawns would just, instead of having so many, you could at least eliminate one of those.
I don't have a problem with that. On the other hand, we don't know what the specialties of them are. I don't know why we have a separate company to allegedly do restoration either, but we'll look into it. We'll find
Well,
out.
the question that I don't have the answer to is if Greenway has the aerating machines and, you know, the overseeding capabilities. I would think they do. I've just never explored it with them. But
They're
certainly,
big
and I can put it
companies,
out to
so-
bid. If we want to. It's, you know, it's pretty, you know, the time to seed would be really soon, so it may not be a good time to do it right now, but we can certainly do it in the future. Joe, the answer to your question of how much do we spend on each of this, do you still want to
Sure.
go into that? So the 2017 budget had lawn maintenance at $35,000, tree maintenance at $15,000.
Okay.
And grounds maintenance, which is the other odds and ends that have to be done, was at $62,000.
What does that entail?
Oh, things like when there's a pothole in the parking lot, it gets filled, and the stairs crumble, they get fixed. The pipe that burst near the surf had a hole in it that gets fixed. It's all the,
Okay. Well, all that together is over 10% of our budget, so that's not insignificant.
true. Although the 35 is about to come down.
Yeah,
Thank-
this number is at 22. Jamie?
Hi, Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest, Rye. I'm going to state the the obvious, and you guys are probably hearing me say this on a regular basis, but I just want to make sure, sorry, I've lost my voice for a month now. I want to make sure that we remember to continue to raise this. We spend $500,000 on staff for a passive park, and we spend about $75,000 to maintain the spit and polish and the beauty of the surroundings. I'm not judging, I just want us to keep remembering, we're not paying for teachers, we're paying for lifeguards, I get that, but we spend $500,000 on staff, and we spend $75,000 on keeping the park maintained and beautiful. I just want us to keep saying that. What's our mission? Are we managing to mission, or are we managing to a budget?
I know, and I'm refraining from commenting. A motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second?
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Sack?
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Ferrera?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Salanitro?
Yes.
President Zuckerman?
Yes, thank you. The next item is a contract with New Crystal Restoration for mold remediation. Well, we have mold in the park, and this, Debbie, you want to go into this?
Yes, as everyone who's been paying any attention knows, we had a lot of water problems in the buildings this spring, particularly, but through into the early summer. It was requested by the commission, I think specifically Commissioner Salanitro, that we have the offices looked at for mold to make sure that they were safe for staff to work in. We did that, and equipped with the mold assessment, because indeed there were different kinds of molds in different kinds of offices. We went out and collected 3 bids. The lowest of the 3 is Crystal Restoration.
For how much?
18,000.
And part of the request to have it tested was also for the patrons of the park, not just the workers in the building. So we did some air quality, air sampling. It's a sick building. I make a motion.
Buildings, 2 buildings.
Yes, I make the motion. to,
Second.
award.
Second, I just want to say one thing about that. Debbie, is this in both buildings?
There are rooms in both buildings that need to be addressed, yes.
All right.
But not the restroom, I believe.
Well,
No.
the question that I have, and I'll just reference, we had an earlier conversation with Lisa. I don't have a problem entering into this contract right now, but the park season is almost over. And there are going to be a lot of water coming in, and the question is, if we remediate the mold now, will we not have to do it again in the spring?
I thought there were measures that he's going to take to prevent that from
All
happening.
right.
That's what I
don't have a
thought.
problem. I don't have a problem entering into the contract. I just want to preface that
Well, the
with,
bigger question is, I'm sorry.
also, if we are able to move forward with the contract to get the roof done, that would, on the bathhouse, that would hopefully stem the mold problem, and the bathhouse mold remediation should probably take place after that work is done and before the spring. So I just want to state that for the record. As I say, I think we should enter into this contract, but before we should look a little bit further based on that, since there is a possibility. I'm not going to say it's definitely going to get done because I don't know what the timeline is, but there is a possibility that we may be getting into roof repair before next beach season.
That's fair.
So anyway, with that caveat, please call the roll.
I just want to, we repaired the leaks that created the problem, so we're not anticipating the problem to get reborn.
We've had new leaks.
I don't know about that. That's news to me.
Yeah, well, in the bathhouse,
Not including the bathhouse.
right, well, the bathhouse is the roof that we remediated.
Yes.
Yeah, and there are still some leaks. We haven't figured out where they're coming from in the administration building. But
Yeah.
the larger issues are in rooms that have remained dry.
Right. Okay.
All right, thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Sack.
Yes.
For Acting Commissioner Ferreira.
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Salanitro.
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes. Management report, I think Bill Lawyer is here to give it.
Yes, I am. And just the two parts to it, I guess, the written report, and then Terry included some finances. This is basically the income side of the picture, and in your packages, on page 212 of 213 pages, is the bookkeeper's report showing not just the income, but also the expenses. And it's kind of fine print, and you have to sort of strain to see it, but it shows that.
Our accountant, Navy DeJonovic, is here as well, so she can address
Oh,
that portion
so
of it.
that's fine, good. Just a little sneak preview. Okay, so this is Terry Finelli's notes to me. She, I'm sure if she could, she would have been here at the meeting. But she has a nice report which summarizes what's been going on. It's hard to believe, as we all said, you know, the summer has moved by so quickly. We've had a lot of events over the summer, starting in the spring, and so there's always been the next thing and the next thing, and it was looking forward, and then just suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, it's almost Labor Day. So I think it's been, as she said, it's been a good summer, and we're having a farewell party for the staff coming up in a few weeks, I think it is. And just, as you know, we break down these reports into categories. So the maintenance, she covers the fact that we've been giving the pond the treatment that we are able to now do because we got the DEC permit. And I also mentioned earlier that they have finished phase 2 of the tree work that's going to be done, which was to inoculate the trees. And there's also a special inoculation. One of the trees we have, and there's some really fantastic trees that go back hundreds of years, and there's this one big elm tree, and as you know, most of the elm trees have been killed off by various problems. But because of the support of the Friends, we have this beautiful elm tree right at the almost where you come in to the park from the corner of Dearborn, of Rye Beach and Forest Avenue. So that's one of the ones. And then we have a large number of the ash trees, and we're doing a certain percentage of them each summer, so we can get that done. And then just a few issues having to do with some of the the wear and tear on the showers because, we've had a good summer with lots of people coming there and using those showers, and so they're being fixed, I think, as we speak. Otherwise, I don't think, there's that much that, you have the written report, so in the interest of time, unless you have any questions, just one thing that Terry said, I had to tell you all that she was so proud of the lifeguard staff yesterday, and she called me up this morning to tell me this. Sunday, we had a big attendance, and a child wandered into the water to try to get a ball, and before he knew it, he was underwater. And luckily, the lifeguard spotted this right away, and 2 of them came and converged and got the child, brought him out, and everything. It was a very happy ending to the story, and I think she just wanted you to know this is the kind of quality of the staff we have, and she's very proud of their achievements over the summer. And coming up, I know that the beach season is kind of closing, but September is still a busy month for us. We have several big items going on, mainly the triathlon. We have the Soul Riders who are having a special benefit, and they're paying for the installation of a labyrinth, which is going to be officially opened on the Sunday the 17th, I think it is, for unveiling of it to the public. And I think that's about it.
Sure. Thank you. Navy, were you going to talk about the financials, or briefly?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Navy Dejanovic from Myamarki and Justic, and I will walk you through the Wrightown Park Statement of Revenue and Expenses. It's in your package. It's 4 columns. And so the first column is the budget for Wrightown Park for the entire year, the calendar year 2017. The second column is the pro rata budget, and what that reflects is what we would expect to be 3.5 months of activity, because the park really gets going mid-April. And so that would be what we'd expect the results to be mid-April, May, June, and July. The third column is actual. Those are actual results for the 7 months through July 31st, 2017. And then the fourth column is the variance, budget versus actual. And what that's comparing is basically the second and the third columns where we'd expect to be. So as you can see, our income for the 7 months was $843,000. And that's almost $147,000 better than budget. And that is primarily due to attendance. So we had great weather, and so we had high attendance, high volume, and so we did much better than budget. As far as the expenses are concerned, you'll see that we saved some money in salaries, only simply because we had a very robust budget as it relates to salaries, but we are very adequately covered in all areas. There weren't any reductions or anything of that nature. The benefits are in line with where we would expect them to be and where we budgeted. Utilities, taxes, and interest, that's a little higher than budgeted. Some of that is timing, but if you look at the middle row, utilities was a little higher. That's water. So with increased attendance, we're using the showers and the bathhouse, and so our water bill was a little bit higher than we expected. And then below that, we have administrative. You're going to see that background checks and office supplies was a little bit more than budgeted, but again, that's timing. These are upfront costs. So the background checks happen obviously when we hire a new staff, as well as office expense, because we got the office going earlier in the season, and so this will level off as the year progresses. And then with operations and maintenance, we are fairly consistent in most expenses. The miscellaneous, the $8,800, that was because I think I mentioned last month, we spent $8,200 on an industrial appraisal to get a sense of our assets and where they were, what the value was, and so forth. And then you see there in building, ground, and maintenance, I know it was a subject we discussed earlier, that's about $37,000, $38,000 above budget, and that's because we spent $18,000 unexpectedly to repair the admin building. There were some repairs that we needed that we hadn't anticipated. Other than that, most of the expenses will level off, we think, especially as August ends, because we expect all of the expenses to happen August and then part of September. So overall, we have $715,000 of expenses compared to $843,000 of revenue.
So we end with a net surplus of 127, almost $128,000. And that's $120,000 better than we thought we'd be 7 months in, or 3.5 months into the beach season. I believe, just, looking at the numbers recently in the last weekend or so, this should continue unless, it all depends on the weather. But as far as the expenses are, we watch them, and for anything that we can control is controlled. It's controlled by the beach staff, it's controlled by Debbie, it's controlled by us. The only thing I can't control is the weather, but fingers crossed that the weather continues to be in our favor.
Hope for a nice Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping
Right.
for too, for many reasons. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Navy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Last resolution is to retain Vince Toomey as a special counsel for labor, human resource, and employment law matters that may now or in the future come before the commission. There are from time to time personnel matters that arise, and Mr. Toomey is a very experienced labor attorney who has in the past served the city of Rye, and Joe could comment on that further if he wishes. And so this resolution is before us to retain Mr. Toomey as our labor attorney. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No, I mean, we've known Vince and Rye for a long time. He's very good at what he does. We're not the only ones that use him. He actually, does work for many municipalities in Westchester, and he's very experienced and highly respected.
All right, thank you. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Sack,
Yes.
Acting Commissioner Ferrera,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Salanitro,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. Public comment on non-agenda items. Does anybody wish to speak on anything at all that's not on the agenda? Anything you want.
My name is Ann Muller. I live on Rye Beach Avenue, right across from the beautiful Ryetown Park. I'm also on the board of the Friends of Ryetown Park, and
Can you speak into the microphone?
am I not, you can't hear me? I think I'm the loudest person I know.
That's okay.
Wait, now I can't reach it. Okay.
We can hear you in the room, but it's important for the tape. And
Is it me?
the tens of thousands watching at home.
Tens of thousands. So I was going to start off quickly by thanking Terry, who doesn't happen to be here tonight, but I'd just like to say Terry and Sal and all of Sal's crew do so much for the Friends. They're supportive of all our projects. They go above and beyond. But sadly, she's not here. So I'd like to mention 2 new projects that the Friends are planning on. We've spoken about them before. One is the new duck feeder. We've gone all out. We bought a 3-head duck feeder, and I'm sure some of you remember the history of the duck feeder. A big home run. People loved it. Children, parents, the ducks, but they didn't last. They were vandalized about 5 times. They were broken, smashed, whatever, but no one ever got the money. That was the good part. So we thought, since the sign is still there and it is such a great project, that we thought we would try it again. So we've ordered and have received a 3-head one, like I said, and it is in the process of being fortified, sort of vandal-proof, by a company in Portchester, and we're expecting to get that back pretty soon. And it'll be installed in the same place as it was before, and we would be very happy if there could be some sort of video camera, lights, something there. It would really be helpful. The other project that we're looking to do, and I think you know about this already, is we would like to put a boardwalk, a type of boardwalk, in front of the duck pond where the duck feeder will be. Get rid of those bleachers that are like so dangerous. We don't have any plans right now, but we'd like to proceed, go forward with that, and wondered if you had any thoughts on it. if you know the area, it's very mucky and muddy and
Yeah,
gross.
It is. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Me too.
Good. Okay, great. We will be getting some drawings to you very soon. And the labyrinth people have told us that the leftover bricks that they have and the leftover soil that they have from turning up the whole labyrinth, they will give to us and we will put it down there to get the project going, which I think is great. I think that's all. That's all of the update from Friends, but as a person that lives on Rye Beach Avenue, there are a lot of trees that hang over the wall, onto the street, across the street, that really could use some trimming. And there's a mulberry bush there that has about, I don't know, maybe 20 dead branches. They're going to come down at some point, so maybe Sal or someone could just come and take a look at it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Well, when does Bartlett come back, Bill, to do its annual tree survey?
I don't think it's so much of a Bartlett thing as it could be just, landscaping.
No, but you said trees hanging over the street need to be trimmed.
No, but there's big branches. But there are other branches besides the mulberry. If someone could just take a look at it.
Just about the mulberry, there's, in the underneath, you have the branches. The branches are coming down, and they're just, what would you call, weeping, like coming down.
Weeping because
and-
they're dead.
no, but
We'll take a look.
Look at it.
We'll look.
Yeah, and
We'll look at it and figure out what has to be
yeah,
done.
These are,
Thank you for
mostly-
pointing it out.
yeah.
Here we go around the mulberry bush?
Yes, we did.
All right. Would anybody else like to speak on any item? If not, I'd like a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss a specific personnel issue.
So moved, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. We do not expect to resume the public session except to adjourn. So that will be the park meeting, and the Rye Town Council meeting will immediately follow our executive session. Thank you.
Where do we go to do this?
I was gonna say,